Welcome everyone again. Thanks for joining. This is NativeScript Community Chat for August 12th. And a couple quick updates here. This one will be fairly brief, but we do want to give an update on a couple bug fixes that went in. Some was a pretty good regression fix on an Android line height issue. So this is in tns-core-modules 6.5.15. So still the currently released 6.5 series that's still out. We're still publishing some fixes and patch updates. The 6.5 series, we published .15 just yesterday. That fixed a line height regression issue that had been in probably for the past 2 months. So if anyone had some Android line height issues, definitely update to that latest. That's a pretty critical bug fix there. Another nice community contribution for the isEnabled flag now works properly for SegmentedBar. And then a really nice new feature with iOS that brings it more consistent with Android, where you can use CSS to affect the dialog size. The details for this will be linked on the PDF slides, but you can see that in the linked PRs. This is about the SegmentedBar isEnabled. This is the line height fix for Android. And then this was the PR from a contributor, really nice contribution for iOS here. So that's out now. The other updates we wanted to give was on the progress for, again, 7.0 as we continue talking about 7.0 preparations. The CLI is, as we mentioned last week, is what we're in the middle of now. And I want to give a couple takes on some things that are coming with that. For one, the RCs that are out on the CLI now introduce the NS alias for the CLI. We've also had NSC floating around as an alias, and we've been trying to settle on the exact alias that we want to go with for the future. But NS and NSC both will work in NativeScript 7 as well as TNS. So we may start posting blog posts stating NS as the kind of new default CLI shorthand for 7.0. In addition, this is what the dependencies will look like in 7.0. Again, core will be released as 7.0 here, and then the devDependencies are going to introduce for the first time Android and iOS here. These are what is currently managed in your package with the NativeScript key. As TNS-Android and TNS-iOS. So in 7.0, those will be no longer, and we probably will have a migration that will automatically move those from that key into your devDependencies. The nice thing about this is, number one, it's streamlined with typical NPM. You'll be able to, of course, get the highlight in most editors that kind of show you on highlight what the latest version is. So no more guesswork on that, in the NativeScript key. And it's just a bit more standard and easy to manage this way. It also avoids an extra extraction on the package that the CLI was doing for the runtimes previously. So that's what the package will look like in 7.0 at the baseline. And then, of course, any front-end flavors you're using, those will generally match the versions for those front-end frameworks. So NativeScript Angular RDN 10, for instance, and the others will follow that same pattern. The other big thing that we kind of touched on last week, I want to give a little bit of a glimpse of this here, is the NativeScript config. So we are doing away with nsconfig.json, and we'll be replacing this with NativeScript config. We're planning on, for most TypeScript-based projects, actually introducing this as a TS file. The advantage is that it will import a type from NativeScript Core that makes the config completely strongly typed. So this is self-documenting and also future-proofing, because any change that we can introduce in the config, we can now have it aligned with the NativeScript Core release. And so any strongly typed change you would see, as well as anything new, would be self-documenting in the sense that the IntelliSense for that config would have descriptions. So this is a nice way forward that we're all pretty excited about for just config handling in general. This will also, as we had mentioned before, the embedded package, there'll be a key inside of this config where you can manage those settings all in one place here. We're also talking about providing a plugin config type that would allow plugins to also gain the same benefits with a strongly typed interface against their config that would play into apps NativeScript config as well. So just to provide some extra flexibility and streamlinedness between how plugins interact with project configs and that sort of thing. This will still work for JS projects. So in plain JS, this would just be a JS file already. And there's some ways to enable types in JS as well if we need to do that. But the idea here, again, is just to make a strongly typed config where you can see clearly what can be configured and have descriptions on it describing what those config options do. Let's see. One other thing just went out in the RC for NativeScript Core. So if you're using the NativeScript Core RC, there was a really nice fix for Android modals. So if you had any issue with opening a modal in any flavor, and even in Core on Android with the RCs, that is now fixed in the latest RC. And that was published just this morning. So that was 7.0 RC51 to be exact. But if you're using the RC tag, you would have it. So that's a glimpse of this. We are finishing up the CLI, and we do have devDependencies for the runtimes working already. So this aspect of it is operational already, but we want to try to nail down just the config. So we're basically working through the pass with the config. And at that point, NativeScript 7 will be in a pretty good shape. We'll probably do some final passes of testing against some other projects and maybe polish a few things and then work on the migration in the CLI. So the ns-migrate would be a way to kind of help automate some of that migration. So if you want to move to 7.0, you'll be able to run ns-migrate and it'll automatically convert any ns-config to this NativeScript config and kind of help handle some of that for you in addition to the ts-config changes. The one thing that will probably be somewhat in flux is how much we want to auto-migrate projects for the barrel scoping that we mentioned last week, as far as auto-converting any tns-core-module imports to @NativeScript Core. Some of that we may try to do, but as I think we've mentioned on past community chats, depending on the variants in which that was used, there may be some still manual path adjustments that you may need to make on projects. But we also do have a pretty good list of NativeScript 7 prepared plugins. I mentioned a list here in this issue, but we'll be publishing, along with the NativeScript 7.0 announcement, a full, complete list and any breaking changes that would be introduced in those along with that announcement. The only breaking change in these thus far has been in Firebase. And Firebase that's published in @NativeScript Firebase now under an RC. This will be the 7.0 compatible version of that. It introduces a Firebase ESM symbol that you can use versus the standard star as Firebase that a lot of people were using. So that's the only breaking change out of these thus far. Again, all the Pro UI Suite plugins are already updated. All the NativeScript community UI plugins, those are the material ones. And then these are some others. Some have been scoped against NativeScript that will probably be maintained in a monorepo amongst the TSC, and at least committers will probably have a monorepo of these plugins to help streamline their management. And then some others may be kept on InStudio just depending on really the functionality and whether we want to bring that into Core at some point. So some may stay off the NativeScript scope. But in general, the 7.0 final announcement will have a full list of those. And any outliers that are out there, if you're using the RCs and you have an issue with the plugin, definitely share it with us. We just updated another this morning, which was NativeScript Stripe. And generally, we've been posting PRs as they get mentioned to us or they come up in our own projects. So certainly, if you have one out there that has an issue on any RC that you're using, let us know. We're happy to post a PR on those. And along with the 7.0 announcement, we will have a blog post describing how to bring plugins up to date And we'll look to try to publish that before the 7.0 announcement. You know, generally, it's just an updating of paths to match the barrel. And as we mentioned previously, we believe that once everyone is using that barrel, it'll make things like this much easier from this point forward into the future. We'll be able to make deep refactoring changes in core and it have less effect on anyone out there because they won't be reliant on some deep path that may be affected by a refactor change. And then, of course, also the tree shaking you can take advantage of with those now ES 2017 built core and those types of things. So that is the updates for today. I'll open up for Q&A if anyone has a question about anything that's been going on.
Yeah, with the config you just showed the ID in there, do you also have something for different IDs per platform?
Yes, great question. So yes, definitely. There'll be an Android and iOS key in here as well. And you can embed different bundles as you had been able to do before. Essentially the exact same configuration that you can do today in nsconfig is just going to be wrapped into this config and just consolidate it to one place. So we just want to get rid of...
Great, thank you.
Yep. So yeah, we plan to match the keys exactly one-to-one. So there's no difference or breaking change in the key from what's in nsconfig. At least that's the general consensus right now. But I think in general, it allows us to introduce more things into this and provide a bit more power that'll be self-documenting on its own through IntelliSense that you can configure. But with that, if no one else has any other questions, again, it was a brief update for today. Thanks again for all the great feedback to everyone out there who's been reporting on the RCs. There's been some really just wonderful reports, detail as well in those, and it's really helping to make NativeScript 7.0 much more solid. There's been some really great things people have found, and we've been able to roll out updates often on a daily basis for those things as they come up. So really, really thank you to everyone out there reporting those things. And we'll try to give more of an update next week and maybe a preview at the new home page, because we have been redesigning the home page that we're going to debut along with the 7.0 announcement. And we'll see if we can't show some of that off in next week's meeting. But otherwise, you guys have a great rest of the week and weekend, and hopefully everyone is staying safe and healthy out there. Really appreciate it. Take care, everyone.